If not, I'm going to get into the next big part of the presentation about data importation. So before I actually show an example of importing data, I'm going to switch to the Sacramento YOLO agency, and I'm going to try out one of our calculators. So you can get to this by going to Tools on the navigation bar, Calculators, and I'm going to run the vector index calculator. And I'm quickly going to select these, and then I'll go through these selections as well. I just want the calculator to run in the background while I describe it. So yep, it's running now. So this is our vector index calculator. This is a tool that many agencies use to set action thresholds for when they need to be doing control activities, doing pesticide applications, things of that nature. It's a very well-known tool. And it's used kind of across the United States. For within this agency, what I'm doing is just running it for the year 2025 with a time interval of 1 month. So it's going to run a calculation for every month. And I am doing very broad groupings of all of the species that this agency collects and for all trap types. You might want to run it a little bit more specifically, but I'm kind of just using this as an example. And I'm going to show you what that vector index looks like for the year 2025. So this is what their calculator looks like. On the on the y-axis here, we have the actual vector index, the number of infected females per trap night per 1,000 mosquitoes tested. And then here's the x-axis, which is the time from the beginning of the year to the end of the year with the various species. So they max out at a vector index of 174. So what does that mean? You know, it's this information on its own might have some use to an agency, but it might be missing a lot of additional context, like uh, you know, if this is the number in a marshy part of Florida versus a part of New Hampshire, those numbers probably likely mean very different things. Um, Additionally, if you're looking within an agency boundaries, if this is the vector index from a city center versus maybe a more rural, swampy area, they might have two very different interpretations. So to accurately be able to set the action thresholds, you need additional years worth of data in the system to know whether or not for this selection, this vector index value is anomalous and maybe requires additional control activities. So because Sacramento YOLO has been using our system for many years, they have decades worth of mosquito surveillance data in the system. So now using the criteria that you have selected, you're going to be able to compare it across multiple years of data to see whether or not this 174 is actually anomalous and requires intervention, or is this just a typical vector index value for this region because of the geographic characteristics around it. Many agencies have been using VectorServe for quite some time, and a lot of their historical data is already entered into the system. But I know that many of you on the call, I see your names, and some of you have not been using us for nearly as long as Sacramento YOLO has. So we always try to recommend that you try to focus the off season on getting historical data entered into the system so that you can use tools like this to the peak of their potential. Almost all of our analysis tools, the vector index calculator, the abundance anomaly calculator, the pool infection rate calculator, our tick calculator, our publicly available maps are all dependent on having multiple years worth of data in the system so that you can accurately, see whether or not this peak in mosquitoes at the beginning or in the middle of the season is of actual concern. Okay. So how, let's say you maybe this is your first year using VectorServe, how would you actually get that data into the system? Um, if you go, the easiest way to do this is probably through importing Excel or CSV tables that you already store locally. You can do this by navigating on the navigation part of Tools, Data Import. This is the data import tool that we have within VectorServe. To begin with, I'm going to just talk about this green box down here. These are some resources that are available to you as users to help you get your data files ready for importation. So we have import specifications, which will bring you here. This is a Box account, and you'll be able to download these. So I'm going to just work with them in Excel because it's a little bit easier in this format. So this is the data import specification. This is going to guide you on how to structure the Excel files that you might be storing locally to match our import specifications, and that way they can be imported to VectorServe so that you can run these calculators and analysis tools. You'll see that the first sheet is called specifications, and then we have some sheets named for various reference tables, and then we have some sample Excel spreadsheets. So the specifications are outlining what are the potential columns that you could include in an Excel import um, related to the various tables that you might be importing to. So as an example, for the surveillance sites, you would be entering in your agency code, your four-letter agency code. If you're creating a site, what is the site code, the six-digit site code that you want created? What do you want that value's name to be? Where is that located? You can do this in decimal degrees. You can put the latitude, longitude, decimal degrees in degree minute seconds or in degree minutes. So this is just showing you what are the fields available that can be included in a import file. It gives a brief description of what do we mean by this value. It tells you whether or not it's required. So to do the importation of sites, you need to have the agency code and the site code, and you need at least one pair, some combination of the latitude and longitude values when you're importing. And then there's a lot of optional fields. These are not required, but like what is the precision that you have these coordinates at? What's the elevation? The any address information that might be important for that? What's like the land usage around it? Is this agricultural land, wildlife land, things like that? And we do this for each of the different types of tables that you can import to. So here's the same thing for arthropod collections, where you need to have your agency code, what's the site that this particular trap was set at. Um, and then the other required fields are things like what's the trap type, the collection date, the how many nights was the trap out for, and were there any problems with the trap? Did the battery run out or did the light burn out? Things like that. We have these specifications for every data type that you can import data for into the system. So this is arthropod collections, but in more of a spreadsheet format. So it's not, the data isn't stacked vertically. You would have a column for each species and sex pair. That's what this particular specification is outlining. As well as for pools, what pools are you creating that are going to be tested for pathogens in the laboratory? What are the test results from those pool tests? Things like who is the agency doing the test? What's the testing agency? What disease were they testing for? What test method did they use? So this file is supposed to help guide you in the development of those of a CSV or Excel file that you would be importing into the system from your historical data. The next sheets are reference sheets. So you might be entering something like a gravid trap. But when you're creating your Excel file, are you supposed to enter it as gravid trap, like GRAVID? So these are files to help you know exactly what we're expecting, and we use an acronym mostly for things like the trap type, the genus and species that you might be importing, the test target, what kind of disease are you importing, and we'll let you know, okay, if it's a gravid trap, then in the import file, you should use the term GRVD for gravid. If you're importing mosquito species and you want to import some Aedes aegypti, you would have two columns, one for genus, one for species, AE for Aedes, and aegypti spelled out for Aedes aegypti. For your pathogen testing, you would have your acronym. If you're testing for chikungunya, it would be CHIKV. And sorry if this is a little bit hard to see on the Zoom I'm noticing now, but I would recommend just taking some time and looking through the import specifications, as they'll provide you with some guidance on how you should be structuring your historical data in an Excel file. The rest of the sheets at the bottom are samples. So these will provide you with an example of how the data should be structured when you're ready to import. So if you are thinking about importing your surveillance sites, let's look at this one first. This is an example of how that could be structured when you're importing them to the system. So you have your agency code, the site, the six-digit site code. What's that site's name? The latitude, longitude using decimal degrees, what's the coordinate position, and the rest of these were the optional fields that I went through earlier. I can zoom in on these again. Um, the next thing, the last one I'll just show you here is like if you're going to import a bunch of historical trap records. So this is the agency code. This is the site where that trap was set. This is the person who did the mosquito identification. Here's the trap type, the lure that was used, the collection date, the number of nights, the trap problem. And like I said, this is in the spreadsheet format. So then you'll have a column for each individual trap type for each individual species and sex combination pair. So this would be Aedes aegypti eggs, Aedes aegypti larvae, Aedes aegypti females, and so on for all the potential species that you might have collected in that trap. We also have some formatted data import versions, which are these three files down here. I'll just show them quickly. These are specific for arthropod collections. This is a very common format used by agencies across the country. So we created a specific import process for these where you would have your sites created in the system already, and then you would use this form to reference here's the site name and site code where it was trapped, and then you would have a defined list of mosquitoes that are commonly or exclusively caught, or not exclusively, but these are the mosquitoes that these are only the mosquitoes that you catch in your area. So you could, if you are in South Dakota and you don't need Aedes aegypti, you could just remove that column and then kind of just reuse this format over and over again if you're going to be importing data regularly to the system. So we have an example file here, which is this customized spreadsheet example. And we also have a PDF file that kind of walks you through how to use this import format. There's a couple tricks to it, but yeah, we would again be if you have any questions on and you want to use this format, we would be happy to answer them if you reach out to us at help@vectorserve.org. Okay, so I'm going to just very quickly run through an example of a import of historical data. Um, so I'm going to open this file. So this is a file of like, let's say historical data that this fake agency wants to import into their system. Um, what we have, the trap and the coordinate information. We have the trap and coordinate information. We have what species were collected in the trap. Um, what life stage was it collected at? Were there any like egg, larvae, pupae collected? Uh, Females, males, unknown collected. So this is maybe a format that your agency might have previously used, or you might have some data stored in this format. Some of you might have actually noticed that this is how data was stored in CDC's mosquito net. So if you previously contributed data to CDC's mosquito net, you have it in this format and you want it imported into the system, your data might currently look like this. I'm going to close this. And something I'll note is that we work with a lot of mosquito control agencies across the country, and we've helped a lot of them get their historical data into the system so they can run our analysis tools. Because of that, we have a lot of R scripts on our end saved that transform the data from various formats into our import specifications. So if you're having a hard time, transforming the data, quite getting it right into our import specs, always reach out to us. We can probably help you out with getting the data from whatever format you have it in into our import specification. So here's an example of a file of an R script that I wrote last year that helped an agency transform the data from the mosquito net format that I just showed you, CDC's mosquito net format, into our import specifications. Okay, so theoretically, let's say I ran the mosquito net format through the script, and it might produce a file that looks like this. So this is a file for mosquito traps that matches our import specification. So it has the agency code, it has the site, the person who did the identification, all the things about the trap, and then what was found in the trap, including things like what lure did we use and the coordinate precision. So now that we have the data cleaned into our import format, let's try to import this file. So this would be first you're going to select the import method or the import type, excuse me. So these are all the different types of imports that you can do into the system, your pesticide applications, your tick collections, the pools and test results. So we're going to be importing a collection record. I'm going to find that file. So that was the vector serve format. So we have the import type done and we have the file selected. So now let's preview what that import might look like. Okay, so the first step in the import process is that we show you a preview of what the data is going to look like when it goes into the database. So we have a quick preview here shown, and it'll show like this was your first column in the Excel file. This is what is going to go into the system. If you scroll across, you'll see that all of the column names have mapped correctly to values that we have in the system, except for this one that's highlighted as yellow. So in the import file, I had a column called town. So town actually isn't a data field for a collection record in VectorServe. The town and the city information is actually pulled over from the site code. So we have the site number one. When we do this import, it's going to pull over the latitude, longitude information, the address, the town, the environmental conditions, things like that that were all entered at the site. So we don't actually even need to enter this town. But I'm just showing you that if you ever see a yellow bar like this, it means that the import process doesn't recognize what data this is supposed to represent. Okay, so let's try this import test. So we're testing the import. Is this gonna pass all of our validators? Obviously, it's very important that when these data go in, that you're not accidentally entering incorrect information. We don't want values like Tuesday going in for a potential trap type, right? That would be like an incorrect data type. So we run it through a validator first, and oh, we've tripped the validator here. It's saying that we have an issue in row 3. So the value provided for the column lure is invalid. You can't have none or unspecified combined with other values. So let's look at the data import file. Let's look at the third row that was entered. So this is 1, 2, 3. Here's 3. Oh, okay. So here we're saying that the lure was a BG lure and none, which doesn't make sense, right? You can't have none and a BG lure. So let's get rid of the lure, or let's get rid of none and just keep the lure. Let's go back to the tools menu and retry the import. So let's go to data import. We're going to do collections again. Again, we'll see that this column is marked yellow, but that's fine because the town information is going to be pulled over from the site. Let's run this test again. And it's saying now that all of the rows have passed the tests, and we can commit the import to proceed to the final step. So this is what's actually going to save it to the database. We've passed all the validators. The data is good to go. We should be able to do the import. Okay, so now it's saying that the data has successfully been imported. Um, yeah, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about here quickly is we do have some API resources available. If you want to do this programmatically, you could submit the data programmatically through the API. I'm not going to get too involved with that here, but just know that we have some documentation pages. So here is docs.api.vectorserve.org is the documentation page for the API, and here you'll be able to find all of the information that you might need for submitting the data programmatically to the API if you don't want to do this through the Excel or CSV imports. Again, the last thing I want to highlight here is that we've helped a lot of agencies get their historical data into the system, especially new agencies as they're starting to use the system. So if you ever have any questions about data importation, yeah, just reach out to us and we can try to help you get your historical data into the system to better use the analysis tools.